The Russian tradition of the Knights Hospitaller emerged when the Mediterranean stronghold of Malta was captured by Napoleon in 1798 when he made his expedition to Egypt. As a ruse, Napoleon asked for safe harbor to resupply his ships, and then turned against his host once safely inside Valletta. Grand Master Ferdinand von Hompesch failed to anticipate or prepare for this threat, provided no effective leadership, and readily capitulated to Napoleon. This was a terrible affront to most of the knights desiring to defend their stronghold and sovereignty. The order continued to exist in a diminished form and negotiated with European governments for a return to power. The Emperor of Russia gave the largest number of knights shelter in St. Petersburg, and this gave rise to the Russian tradition of the Knights Hospitaller in recognition within the Russian imperial orders. In gratitude, the knights declared Ferdinand von Hompesch deposed and Emperor Paul I was elected as the new Grand Master. Origin. Blessed Gerard created the Order of St. John of Jerusalem as a distinctive order from the previous Benedictine establishment of Hospitallers. It provided medical care and protection for pilgrims visiting Jerusalem. After the success of the First Crusade, it became an independent monastic order, and then as circumstances demanded grafted on a military identity, to become an order of knighthood. The Grand Priory of the order moved to Rhodes in 1312, where it ruled as a sovereign power, then to Malta in 1530 as a sovereign, vassal power. 17th century. In 1698, Peter the Great sent a delegation to Malta under Field Marshal Boris Sheremetev, to observe the training and abilities of the Knights of Malta and the fleet. Sheremetev also investigated the possibility of future joint ventures with the Knights, including action against the Turks and the possibility of a future Russian naval base. Before leaving Malta, Ambassador Sheremetev established diplomatic relations and was invested as a Knight of Devotion of the Order. 18th century. The special relationship between the Knights of Malta and the Crown of Russia continued into the 18th century. From 1766 to 1769, Catherine the Great sent many distinguished Russian naval officers for special training with the Knights of Malta. From 1770 to 1798, there was a continuing presence of the Russian Navy among the Knights of Malta. From 1772 to 1773, Grand Master Pinto sent Balaf Sagramoso as an ambassador to Russia, with the aim of maintaining the order's cordial relationship with the Northern Giant. In 1789, Bailiff Count Giulio Renato de Litta, while on an official visit from the Knights of Malta, assisted with the reorganization of Russia's Baltic Fleet, and later served as a commander with the Russian Imperial Navy in the war against Sweden. In 1782, Empress Catherine sent her son Grand Duke Paul to visit Grand Master de Rohan as a gesture of her respect and admiration. The next year, she sent Count Saro as an envoy to visit de Rohan in Malta to solidify her relationship with the Knights of Malta, and further Russian influence in the Mediterranean. In 1797, Paul I, Emperor of Russia, signed a treaty with the Order of Malta, establishing a Roman Catholic Grand Priory of 10 commanderies in Russia in compensation for the loss of income from the former Polish Grand Priory, which lay in the Polish territory annexed by Russia. In 1798, following Napoleon's taking of Malta, the order was dispersed, but with a large number of refugee knights sheltering in St. Petersburg, where they elected the Russian Emperor Paul I as their Grand Master, replacing Ferdinand Hompesch, then held in disgrace. Hompesch abdicated in 1799, under pressure from the Austrian court, leaving Paul as the de facto Grand Master. Although Paul I was the leader of the Russian Orthodox Church, he assumed leadership of the Roman Catholic order. 19th century, October Revolution of 1917. In 1802, the mission of the Cour des Pages was broadened to that of a military academy, based on the ideals of the Order of St. John. In 1810, the school was moved to the Palace of the Sovereign Order of St. John of Jerusalem. It continued at this location in St. Petersburg for over 100 years. Following imperial decrees of Alexander I of Russia in 1810–1811, a fiscal and legal separation of the Russian tradition of St. John from the main Roman Catholic HQ was created, informed the Hon. Arthur Paget that the Russian emperor was going to make the Russian Priory an independent and separate community, which would have stripped, perhaps 9/10 of the revenues that constituted the order's principal income, although the emperor did not take this action in 1802. By 1810, necessity forced the independence. The Russian order from 1810 was akin to the German Johanniter order, a Johannine tradition, but legally separate. Some authors have claimed that Emperor Alexander I abolished the Russian Grand Priorian, or the order based on decree for 1810, which has been badly misread, misleading even Russian authors such as V.A. Durov. In fact, the decree of 1810 Ukasha 24.134, the 26th of February 1810, which removed the order's property, specifically states that the order is still to continue, and that all the expenses connected with the maintenance and running of the order should be paid from the state treasury, cited from the Ukasha. The court almanacs following that period still listed the Order of St. John, listing as Protector Alexander Pavlovich. In the 1813 almanac, the total membership of the Russian Grand Priory was 853, and the Catholic Grand Priory numbered 152. A further 21 members of the order resided in Russia, providing in excess of 1,000 members. A further decree was issued in 1817 forbidding army officers from wearing their decorations because they received them from outside of Russia from a foreign bailiff of the Roman Catholic order, which no longer officially existed in Russia by then. No such decree was ever issued concerning members of the non-Roman Catholic Russian Grand Priory, and in fact the reverse was true. One of the leading French bailiffs of the Military Order of Malta, who had studied the Russian tradition, provided a footnote in his book. Nevertheless, Bazaars have exceptionally authorized the eldest sons of the descendants of hereditary commanders to wear the decorations. Such an authorization can be cited in the military service records of the 19th of October 1867. One can also find the name of Demidov, in his quality as hereditary commander, in the Almanac de Gotha and in the Almanac de Saint Petersburg. 1913-14 p. 178. Pearden, Count Marie-Henri Thierry Michelder, Histoire politique de l'ordre souverain de Saint-Jean de Jerusalem, de 1789 and 1955, Volume 2. Page 197. In the division of petitions of His Imperial Majesty's Chancellery, for 1912, Record No. 96,803, permission is given to Count Alexander Vladimirovich Armfeld to wear the insignia of the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, with the transfer of that right, after his death, to his son. Portraits of Russian nobles wearing the Order of St. John can be found throughout the 19th century, with listings of members found in the court almanacs from the early 19th century through to the 20th century. Evidence of the order's existence in Russia throughout the 19th century on into the 20th century is given by various publications contemporary to that period. Some of these works include Altzog, the Reverend Dr. Johannes Baptist, translated by the Reverend Drive F.J. Pubish and the Reverend Thomas S. Byrne, Manual of Universal Church History, Clark & Co., Cincinnati, Ohio, 1874, Volume 2. Briere de la, A Knight of Malta, writing in L'Ordre de Malta, Le Passé, Le Présent, Paris, 1897. Burke, So Bernard, The Book of Orders of Knighthood and Decorations of Honor of All Nations. Hurst and Blackett, London, 1858. Chambers's Encyclopedia. and R. Chambers, London 1863, Volume 5, page 729. De Tauber, Professor Baron Mitchell, L'Empire Paul I de Rossi, Grand Maître de l'Ordre de Malta et son Grand Prieur Russe, Paris 1955. Karnovich, Eugema, Knights of Malta in Russia, Saint Petersburg, 1880. Lieber, Francis Encyclopedia Americana, Kerry and Lee, Philadelphia, 1832. Volume 11. Laumeier, Jean-Francis Nicolas, Histoire, Costumes et Décorations de tous les ordres de chevalerie et marques d'honneur. Brussels, August Wallin 1844. Magnicida, Recueil historique des ordres de chevalerie, Paris 1843. Maine. Dictionnaire encyclopédique des ordres de chevalerie, Paris 1861. Romanov, Grand Duke Nicholas Mikhailovich, Portraits Russes, St. Petersburg, Tome I, Fascicle 1, Fascicle 2, Fascicle 3, Fascicle 4, 1905, Tome 2, Fascicle 1, Fascicle 2, Fascicle 3, Fascicle 4, 1906, Tome 3. Fascicle 1, Fascicle 2, Fascicle 3, Fascicle 4, 1907, Tome IV, Fascicle 1, Fascicle 2, Fascicle 3, Fascicle 4, 1908, Tome V, Fascicle 1, Fascicle 2, Fascicle 3, Fascicle 4, 1909. Yate, Arthur C., The Future of Roads, article in the Journal of the Central Asian Society, Volume I, 1914, Part 2, The Central Asian Society, London, 1914. 20th-21st centuries. This Russian hospitaller tradition of St. John continued within the Russian Empire. Russian émigrés who went into exile following the revolution in 1917 have attempted to keep the order alive. On the 24th of June 1928, a group of 12 Russian hereditary commanders met in Paris to re-establish the activities of the Russian Grand Priory. They were supported by 3 other Russian nobles who were aspirants and admitted as knights, and a hereditary commander of the Catholic Grand Priory of Russia. They came under the leadership of Grand Duke Alexander Mikhailovich to 1933, and Grand Duke Andrei Vladimirovich to 1956. Both holding the title of Grand Prior. In 1939, Grand Duke Andrei and the council agreed to the creation of a priory in Denmark, the Priory of Dacia. On 9 December 1953, the hereditary commanders held a reunion in Paris and drew up a constitution for the Russian Grand Priory in exile. In February 1955, the exiled Grand Priory based in Paris was registered as a foreign association under French laws. The Russian Grand Priory of the Order of St. John of Jerusalem, Grand Duke Vladimir Kirillovich became the protector to the Paris group in 1956, but refused the title of Grand Prior. Commander Nicholas Chirikov became the Dean of the Union until 1974. Prince Nikita Trubetskoy became the remaining member of the council, which effectively signaled the end of the formal Paris group. In 1958, a working title was adopted, Union des Descendants des Commandeurs Héréditaires et Chevaliers du Grand Prieur Russe de l'Ordre de Saint-Jean de Jerusalem. Although by 1975, with the death of the secretary, the original leadership had died out and the jurisdiction of the Paris group came to a definite legal end, it is asserted that the tradition has been maintained by the Priory of Dacia, together with a number of descendants of the hereditary commanders associated with the Russian Grand Priory Association. In 1977, however, Count Nicholas Bobrinsky, along with several of the hereditary commanders, also claimed to maintain this tradition and became what is now known as the Orthodox Order of the Knights of St. John, Russian Grand Priory. This international philanthropic and chivalric group in the Russian tradition is based in New York, and has over 600 members including heads and descendants of several of the original hereditary commander families as well as descendants of the House of Romanov and other royal houses. and has recognition as an NGO, DPI by the United Nations. Paul I had created under Russian law, the family commanders of the Russian Grand Priory with hereditary rights. It is the descendants of these commanders who have, with the support of members of the imperial family, continued that Russian tradition in exile. In the latter days of the empire and into exile, these were known as hereditary commanders. The commanders organized within the Russian Grand Priory, a corporate organization which existed under various names: Association of Hereditary Commanders, Russian Philanthropic Association of the Descendants of the Hereditary Commanders of Sovereign the Order of Malta, Union des Commandeurs Héréditaires et Chevaliers du Grand Prieur Russe de l'Ordre de Saint John de Jerusalem, and the longer Union title given above. Today various groups claim to be the continuation of the Russian Priory. The Russian tradition of the Knights Hospitaller is not recognized by the Alliance of the Orders of St. John of Jerusalem or the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, self-styled mimic orders. The history of the survival of this tradition has been complicated by various mimic orders. The large passage fees collected by the American Association of the Sovereign Military Order of Malta in the early 1950s may well have tempted Charles Pickle to create his own Sovereign Order of St. John of Jerusalem, Knights Hospitaller, in 1956. Pickle avoided the problems of being an imitation of SMOM by giving his organization a mythical history by claiming the American organization he led was founded by Russian hereditary commanders living in or visiting the USA and dated to 1908, a spurious claim, but which nevertheless misled many, including some academics. In truth, the foundation of his organization had no connection to the genuine Russian tradition of the Knights Hospitaller. Once created, the attraction of a few exiled Russian nobles into membership of Pickle's order lent some credence to his claims. This organization and others have led to scores of other self-styled orders. Two offshoots of the Pickle order were successful in gaining the backing of two exiled monarchs, the late King Peter II of Yugoslavia, and King Michael of Romania.